Welcome to the Shrink Down. Today we're diving into a timely and listener-suggested topic, the holiday season, a time of joy, getting together with friends and family, but also one that can bring a lot of stressors. We're going to tackle everything from implementing healthy boundaries with family members to creating new traditions without hurting anyone's feelings. We'll also discuss navigating tricky dynamics with toxic relatives, finding ways to entertain the kids while you're still working, and setting limits on time and energy to stay mentally healthy through it all. But before we get into today's topic, we're going to do our 4-minute faves. Terry, do you want to start us off today?
Sure. So mine is a recent Netflix documentary, Martha, which is about Martha Stewart. I watched it over the weekend, I think. It's about 2 hours long. So I broke it into two viewings. And my husband watched it with me. We both really liked it. I wholeheartedly recommend it for anybody. It was a fun, easy watch. And she is a fascinating person.
Fascinating.
Yes. So Lauren's going to be with me on this.
I'm watching. I'm almost done with it, but yes, it is really good.
She is the original influencer. She is a hustler. She is a queen hustler. She has been a model, a stockbroker, a whatever she's been now, her own. She's Martha Stewart.
Lifestyle.
Her own entity.
I mean, she's always been in the background of our lives, right? Like she's always sort of been there and learning more about her. And she is ballsy and no holds barred. She is just talks about her marriage of 27 years, her divorce. She really lets it fly. And it just was really enjoyable. As a joke, I am not very skilled in certain areas of homemaking. And as a joke, when we first got married, my husband would call me Martha, in reference to Martha Stewart. So we actually got a real kick. We got a real kick out of watching it. But I think anyone of all ages, genders, I think anybody would like to watch it. Highly recommend.
It's just like really well done in terms of like a story.
Yes.
Yeah. They go through the whole prison, like all the legal stuff.
That's what I mean. She's lived 19 lives.
Multiple lives. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she has continued to evolve, which I think is so cool.
She's like still relevant. Like her friendship with Snoop Dogg, I think is hilarious.
so cool.
That was
Was he
brilliant.
in the documentary?
That was smart.
Was he in the documentary?
Yes.
Was he in? He was. Okay.
Yeah, he's
I mean, you guys probably saw at the Olympics, they were hanging out together and like their like conversation. Like, I mean, she just is so good at keeping herself relevant in a very like age appropriate way, right? Like she's
One of the things I read was that one of her criticisms of the documentary once it came out was that they didn't use enough Snoop Dogg music. And she actually, because they do just a lot of like background instrumental, like as like they're changing, like whatever. Or she's like walking through the garden or whatever. She wanted like all Snoop Dogg music.
That's hilarious.
That was like one of her big criticisms. So yeah.
The other interesting part is she was married for almost 30 years, right? And they had one daughter together. Her husband is still alive. Her ex-husband is still alive. So, you know, they're both in their 80s. And so it's very interesting too, that he is featured so prominently and she speaks so openly about him and their marriage and their early relationship and then the divorce and infidelities, etc.
They were incredibly young.
They were very young when they got married. They were both in college.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, very young. And he's still alive. So I ended up down a Google rabbit hole because I think she's such an interesting person. So very good to watch.
I love your Google rabbit holes. I love it. I always learn so much.
Yeah.
How about you, Wilhelmina?
Well, I at first was going to do the fun show I've been binging, which is Dr. Odyssey. Highly recommend. It's just fun. But then I put on this sweater today, which
oh my God, that's adorable.
So I've been wearing this several times because this was part of my Newly rental.
Why don't you describe it?
I'm going to. Oh, my sweater? Yes. Oh, it is.
For those that don't have the visual.
Yeah.
For anyone not watching us right now.
So it's just a, light brown tan sweater. It's a nice weight. And then it has on the front a hedgehog. And it's adorable. And the hedgehog is a little textured. It is I've just had so much fun with it. So I know I mentioned Nuuly in a couple episodes back when we talked about fashion and things like that. I have been doing Nuuly for about a year. So it is a clothing rental subscription, and you pay, I think it's around $90, and you get to pick 6 items, and for about a month. And I think you can actually return quicker if you want. So it's really just you're paying this much per month, and then you can kind of use it however you want it. I've kind of just stuck to like a month at a time. So I'm getting like a month's worth of clothes. But the reason it's so good right now is I started it around the holidays because I always want some fresh outfits, some fun things to wear for holiday parties or outings, things like that, something to wear for Christmas Eve. And yet, how many new holiday outfits do I want hanging in my closet? Not very many. So last year, that's how I started it. And I loved it, and then used it for the whole year. I used it when we went on our trip together to kind of get some things for our trip. And it is, it's a way to find some new things, maybe try out a new style, maybe try out a style you wouldn't normally do, get some fun things that you're like, I don't know how many times I'm going to wear this, but I'll wear it for a couple times and that'll be fun. And then I also feel, just from like a kind of, we talked about the impact on the environment with clothes and all of that. It sort of feels like I'm buying, I'm taking it for a little bit and then giving it on, and we're all enjoying this. And it feels kind of like we get the boost of getting some new things, but we give it away, and then we get some new things, and our closets aren't getting cluttered. And so it has been.
Is it like an updated Rent the Runway? Do people still do that?
I think people still do that. Yeah.
Okay.
So Rent the Runway, yeah, I would say it is, but this time you just get it for longer, and you get like clothes you would wear every day.
Can you adjust like how many pieces you rent at a time? Because you mentioned 6. Like, do you know if that's adjustable?
So you can do 6 is really the minimum. I mean, you wouldn't want to do less than 6 because you'd want to be getting your money's worth. But if you want to add more, I think it's $20 more per item.
So you can add
with a max. There's like a max of like maybe 9 items or something. There's a max to that. So you can't just be like, I'm going to rent 20 items. But then there's discounts, and sometimes it's like you get a free rent or free item. And here's the thing, if you like it, you can buy it at the discount. So so it's like, I've been like, should I buy this hedgehog sweater? I might, I don't know. But I will say though, if you start buying all of it, it kind of makes it like, well, now you're just shopping. But I definitely bought a couple things, not as much as I thought, because once you use it for the month, then you give it back and you get new things. So
good point.
I will say I have a link that gets you, I think, $20 off your first rental. So I'll make sure we put that in the link with my
Instagram
fave, and try it out, because it is really fun. And you get to pick everything out.
I would say it's spelled Nuuly, because a friend recommended it to me a few months ago, and I couldn't find it because I heard her say Nuuly.
You didn't think that's how you spelled it?
No. And I had to text her. So it's Nuuly.com.
Yes.
Do they also do accessories like purses and stuff like that? Or just clothes?
Just clothes.
Okay.
They do outerwear, so you can do jackets. I love a new jacket, so I almost always in the winter and fall rent a jacket. And Terry, I know you had mentioned that it was overwhelming to you.
Yeah.
And you were like, I went on and it was just too much. And it is.
I just want it picked out for me. I don't want to have to look at anything.
Yeah. Right. So what I would say as a tip, before I kind of rent, I think about what am I wanting this month? And so like, I actually tracked out the last month, and I was like, okay, I have a holiday party, I have a friend's 40th.
Right.
And then I kind of had a vision of some of the things I wanted. Okay, I wanted a dress for this. I wanted a fun top for this. I wanted a sweater for work, or I have these pair of pants. I want a new fall sweater for Thanksgiving. So like, I kind of think about that, and then I search those items. So I'm not just like
sliding through everything.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's some good planning.
So screw peruse Pinterest, screw. I know. No.
So screw it.
Screw it. One of everything. I don't know. So yeah, peruse Pinterest, get some ideas. What are you liking? And go
it's
for
a good
that.
idea.
Very cool.
So highly recommend. Lauren,
Cool.
what are you loving?
Okay, so we chatted a little bit before we came on here, full disclosure. So I knew Terry was doing Martha, which is originally what I was going to do, but it was okay because of sort of the Martha renaissance, what have you. So I am one of those people, and we'll kind of get to this probably at some point, but I'm one of those people that like itches to start pulling out my Christmas stuff right as soon as Halloween is done. And I didn't used to be that way, but COVID certainly shifted things for me. And like, I have a lot of fun with it. So I had started the documentary as well. And then I was just at Marshall's last week. And I happen to love like the Martha Stewart vibe and have for a really long time. I find some of the cooking a little bit overwhelming, but I love like getting a magazine of hers every once in a while and like looking at some of her decor ideas and things like that. So I've sort of been following her for a while. And so I was at Marshall's the other day. Okay, you guys, I can't even fit this in the thing. Look at this bell. Can you even see how cool?
Oh my gosh.
It's huge.
It's awesome.
Big.
It's like 3 feet. I know. It's like this.
It's a big
I know. Isn't it
red,
so fun?
It's a big red Christmas bell with holly on top.
So here's what I'll tell you. I will find a link for you, but the link, I had searched it beforehand because, of course, once it's at like a Home Goods or whatever, right. So it's on that Mercari website.
Oh, yeah.
For $75. I got it for half of that. It's so fun. They had it in red and silver and gold, and it's Martha Stewart brand, of course. In Home Goods, Marshalls, TJ Maxx, they all have a ton of Martha Stewart stuff, like typically, but then like especially this time of year. So super fun. It just kind of went with the Martha vibes that I'm feeling right now as I'm like starting to decorate and watch the documentary and things like that. So
now where are you going to put that? Like, how are you going to?
So it's next to the fireplace right now.
Nice.
Okay. So it's just kind of cool, right? Like, so it's like under the garland, but it's like huge. So it's like a little statement piece.
We'll like it.
We'll see if it stays there. Yeah.
Lauren, you have always been really good with Yes, and I remember
I love a hosting moment.
You do. And I remember in graduate school, I spent a lot of time at your apartment because we were both kind of new to the city and we spent a lot of time hanging together.
Yeah.
And I remember the holidays and going over to your apartment. We were hanging out for just another
something.
And you had wrapped your pillows in and made them presents.
Yes.
And I was like, wow, that is so cute and so easy to do. And from then on, you've always done that, like those kind of things. And it creates such a homey feel.
I love it.
And I've always loved your creativity around that. So I love the bell.
Martha inspired. Yes, exactly. So we'll find something. But what I would recommend is just go to one of your stores. It might feel a little bit early, but those things are gone in like 5 minutes. And they're just super fun and half the price of what you can find online. So highly recommend. Vanessa, what you got?
So I also referencing our fashion discussion, and we were talking about, I think at one moment, how a lot of times styles kind of come back, but they're never quite the same.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I think I found something that actually is very quite the same, and it's kind of making it like a comeback. I'll say that there's more kind of options, I feel like, but I'm going to show you guys, but I just bought these Converse.
Oh yeah.
And they're the platform ones, which I had in high school.
Very
and so
cute.
They haven't really changed much. No. So I will say this is one of those things, if you have them still in your closet, you can pull them out and they're still in style. Yeah. But yes, I just bought these and I really love them. I needed a little bit of a platform because I got some pants that were like a little bit too long, but they're like sweatpant material. So I didn't want to like hem them. And I was like, I just need like a little, like an inch.
Is that
like a little lift?
Converse brand or a different?
Yeah, these are Converse.
Because I was seeing at Nordstrom's a lot of Converse style shoes, but they're different designers.
These are actual Converse. I got these at DSW actually for a really good price, but Free People had them too. And I really like this color. So this is Ginger Snap. So I just bought them for a trip and I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't had Converse since high school. And I actually had a pair of platform Converse because I used to wear my Jankos that were really long and I needed like a little lift. So I used to wear them, but I've gotten so many compliments. In fact, Everly, my daughter, was like, Mom, those are so cute. Do they have those in kids? And they actually do. So she now wants a pair.
Of
so
course.
She wants a pair. So yeah, so I got those from DSW. They were super good price, but they have them. Free People has them. Nordstrom has them. Yeah, but that color ginger snap is a really good one. So I was like, okay, here's one
for
style
the season
that's like back in, and there's so many different like cute styles now.
Yeah.
And it's funny because that was actually one of Everly's like first sneakers that I got her when she started walking, were the Converse. They had the little Velcro ones for the kids. And Mark has a couple pairs. So I feel like that's one of those good ones that they're gonna be around forever and they don't change a whole lot. But yeah, that's my fave for today. My platform all-star Converse.
So Vanessa, that was Maddie's back to school shoe for this year.
Really?
When she started middle school,
cute.
she had an outfit and she wanted the high top though. So she got the platform
high top,
just plain white, and she's been wearing it because a lot of the girls her age for like dresses for like dances will wear
sneakers.
Formal. Yes. And then the socks, the high socks and the high tops. And honestly, I think it's adorable. I love the look. So I totally agree. They're way back and they are fun.
Really cute. Yeah. And I did, in all fairness, I tried the high top and I was like, probably not. I was like, probably not. So I went with the low top, but there are high tops. But for me, I felt like the low tops were the better one. But yes, I've been loving them. So that's my fave. All right. Well, now that we've shared our holiday faves, or not our holiday faves, just our faves, let's get into today's topic. As I was thinking about today's topic, I thought about kind of my own personal stress, the things I've experienced during the holiday season. And the one that kind of immediately jumped out to my mind was something that I've talked about with this friend group, but I've also talked about with other friends. And that's, how do you navigate being in different places with different family members at the same time? So this is something that came up with me as a kid, really, when my parents got divorced. And obviously when you're a kid, your parents just tell you where to go, but at some point you become an adult, right? And you have to kind of decide where you're going. And then, even if your parents aren't divorced, at some point, if you do get married, then you're also now introducing like another family. So it's, trying to make everyone happy, being somewhere at the same time. Sometimes you have to say no to someone. And luckily my family hasn't ever said, anything like negative to me or made me feel like you have to come sort of thing. But it's definitely like a pressure that I know that I put on myself. And I can remember when I used to live in Chicago and my parents were both living there, I would feel like I was spending my entire holiday in the car. Like, driving around to see everyone and trying to fit everyone and being like, okay, now I gotta go to the next house. And it just became like just so much. And when I moved out of state, I had to then decide not just like, okay, I'm going to go to everyone's house. Then I had to decide like, which family do I, who do I go visit? Who do I get on an airplane to go visit? And it wasn't until I think like after COVID, when everything kind of shut down and we experienced our first Christmas at home, that my husband and I kind of just looked at each other and said, this is nice. Right? This is really nice. So we kind of came up with a plan of how we would navigate that felt good to us. And luckily, like our family has been so great, and no one's ever made us feel bad. But I know I've talked to friends, who've said like that their parents or whoever, give them like a guilt trip. And so I think that's, one of the common stressors that you hear a lot about during the family season or the holiday season is how do you navigate not disappointing someone. And sometimes, like I said, it's not even that the family members saying anything. It's like your own personal, like guilt, feeling bad about not being where, like having to say no to someone or not being able to be there. But I definitely feel like it was a good feeling when we kind of came to that resolution that like, okay, we're going to set this boundary for ourselves. We're going to do what we feel is best for us as a family and then let everybody know. And it was nice that everybody was supportive. So that's one of the things that I know that I have experienced with a holiday stressor and how to kind of navigate that.
I will say when Sam, my oldest, was young, we used to go to my parents and then my in-laws. We used to kind of switch back and forth, spending the night, like Christmas morning, right? And I just remember, and I don't know if it was when he was, his first Christmas or the second Christmas, I remember having a conversation with my husband and saying, as soon as he has memories, I want to be at home for Christmas morning.
Yes.
And so similarly to what you said, love, like recognizing during COVID, like I just had this moment when he was little that it was like, as soon as he starts having memories, I want to be home Christmas morning. So whatever else might be able to vary, but that was something that was really important to my husband and I. And like you said, Vanessa, everybody was very supportive of that. And I think, to your point, yes, you have that sort of, whether it's just feelings of guilt or even just like wistfulness of just like wanting it to be easier. Like, I wish I could be in all of these places. But I always remind myself of something that we all tell our clients, which is like, two things can be true. I can feel that way, and it can still be the right decision to be at, for example, at home on Christmas morning. Right. So I was just like, remind, two things can be true.
The thing that I think about, because I've been in similar scenarios, Vanessa, is, and especially as you get older, at what point do you get to enjoy a part of the day or the holiday?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, my mother-in-law
Never
would like.
Sorry.
You're like, I'm so glad that I'm exactly where everybody wants me to be, which is not where I want to be. So at what, exactly. So at what point do you look at your partner or think about your kids or all of the above and say, I would like to have a nice Christmas, or I would like to have a nice Christmas Eve and not be spending the whole time, the few days off that you have not working with your kids, not in school, to spend that time in a way that you want to be spending it. And maybe that does align with the family you feel obligated to go see. And maybe it doesn't. And how do you carve out time for all of the above? If it's switching off years, if it's going to part of one, if it is saying no, that's just not going to work. I have a close friend who had said, once I realized that we were going to my husband's aunt's sister's house, and that was the tradition, she said, wait a minute, what are we doing? Is this, I know that this has been the tradition, but is this really how we want our family to be spending Christmas Eve? This doesn't work for us anymore. And the thing about traditions is traditions never last forever and ever. They last for a finite period of time. Older people sometimes have a harder time, I think, understanding that, maybe at times. But traditions typically, sometimes they go 5 years, maybe they go 10 years, maybe they go 30 years sometimes. But at some point, things will shift. And whether that's you or other family members, but things, it does holidays require so much flexibility.
And I think it also requires, when you think about what you want as a family, and then having the conversation, kind of like what we talked about with friendships, which means that they may not welcome this news with open arms. They not be like, oh, of course, we just want what's best for you. They might be mad. They might be sad. They might be annoyed. But that doesn't mean it's still not the right thing to do for you and your family.
Like, if you look at the family theory systems, like, families like homeostasis, like they like things to be, because then you know what your role is, you know how things work. But the problem is, when your family grows and changes, like your immediate family, then that can't stay the same. And that can be hard for the people who, like, like parents, for example, right? Like, they are expecting you to be the same role, but you're not anymore, because now you might be a wife or you might be a mother, and so it changes. And that change can be really hard. But like you said, communication is really important there. And even if they don't like what you have to say, like, it's important for you to say it and to feel good about that. And other people might like that hustle bustle. Like, I can think of friends who are like, I like to be with everyone and everywhere. And it's like, that's great. And so there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, if that's not working for you personally, that's okay. You set your boundary, you let everybody know. And that's how
I think, to your point, Vanessa, you can have both in a way, if you kind of figure out what's important about the tradition. Right. So my family, we grew up going to my grandfather's house for Christmas Eve. And so my grandfather had 4 children, and all of his children, their spouses, and the grandkids all went to his house for Christmas Eve. Now, that was back when we were all living within a couple miles of each other. Okay. So, but that was a tradition for a really, really, really long time. It shifted over to my uncle's house when my grandfather no longer could host, and prior to him passing away. But like, so it shifted at that point. And I remember this feeling of like, oh, it's not the same anymore. But actually, now that I'm an adult, so it's shifted from my uncle's house to now, I am the beneficiary of being able to host it. It's no longer on Christmas Eve. So it's not only shifted from my grandfather's house, it's shifted homes, but it's also shifted dates because my family, I really give credit to the sort of the matriarchs of the family, I should say, and the patriarchs, all the aunts and uncles decided it was something that was important for them to still happen, getting together at the holidays. But when it happened, didn't have to be the 24th of December. And I'm so grateful that I have those flexible thinking family members, because how many years later, I'm trying to think, my oldest cousin, I mean, it's gotta be close to 50 years of a tradition that's shifted and changed, but it's still like, what was the goal? The goal was everybody getting together. So it's not the 25th or the 24th, but we still get the experience. And then as a result, you still kind of, what you guys were saying, you kind of get what you want out of the holiday.
Yeah. You pull the things, you pull it, you change, but you pull the things you want, but it is always going to evolve.
Right.
It just
is. Or it'll die.
Or it'll die. Yes, that's true.
So you can decide as a family that also.
Right. Yeah.
That is an evolution.
Right.
We are not doing this any longer.
If they can't be flexible, there is a consequence to that. So.
What are some other things, other stressors that you guys have thought about, you've heard from other people, you've experienced yourselves during the holidays?
I think for me, one of the big things that comes up is the word is like kin keeping. So it's the emotional and physical tasks that are often carried by the mother. This is absolutely invisible labor. And they are the people who are sending out the holiday cards. They're getting the holiday cards ready. They're finding the addresses. They're doing all of that. They are getting the Christmas lists together. They are doing the shopping. They are doing the wrapping. They are doing all of that. And I know I realized this for myself. Honestly, several years ago, I didn't have a word for it, but I was like, wait a minute, I'm an only child and I really just have to buy for like my mom and like my dad and, but it was kind of a small list. And all of a sudden when I married my husband, I was like, and then we did it together early on, but then all of a sudden he kind of fell away. And I was like, wait a minute, why am I buying for everyone? And if I don't do it, it won't get done. And I was like, something needs to change with that. And so I actually said to my husband this year, I said, I don't want you to help with this. I actually want to sit down and think about everything that needs to get done. And then we divide the tasks up. This isn't, I come up with all of it that needs to get done. And then I have you help
you execute, right?
Yeah. I want us to do it together. What gifts are you going to buy? What addresses are you going to find? Like, we are going to do this together. This is not all on me. And I hear that from, I know you guys have talked about it, and I hear about that from everyone, whether they have a name for it or not. They'll just talk about it like, well, that's the assumption. Oh no, my husband doesn't do that.
Do you know what my husband and I started doing, which has been incredibly helpful? So exactly what you're saying, sit down. We actually do a day date.
Oh,
and we go do it. But then also we get like lunch and a cocktail.
That's what
which just makes it
we do the same
so
thing.
Much more pleasant. Yeah. Yes. And then it's part of our holiday.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like actually something that we give to ourselves. But to your point, Wilhelmina, it can be incredibly stressful if you're gift buying for somebody that you don't know as well as your husband knows, right? Like, why in the world are we doing that? Like, this person can actually be very helpful if he actually attends the gift buying. And I don't think necessarily they're always unwilling. I think it's, to your point, invisible labor. We just naturally take it on a lot of the times. Right. And then it's like, wait, what are we doing? Like, let's make this something that we do together.
I'm a big fan of the day date.
Mark and I.
Me too. It's my favorite.
Shopping. Yep.
Mark and I he's always done his family and I do my family. Like we've always just done that. I've never for some reason taken that on, but other things. Yeah. Like you mentioned the photo, the cards, like, okay, but then I was actually thinking a step back, like remembering to go do your family photos,
the photo, right?
getting the outfits, getting the
I was like, well, actually, that's 10 steps later. And then if people are hosting, like we don't host, during the holidays, not at this point, but like if you're hosting, right? Like thinking of like what you're going to serve, cleaning the house, all that thing, like that's a lot of things that you're doing, over the holidays. And it's not just Christmas, it's Thanksgiving or whatever holidays you celebrate. But yeah, I think there's a lot more that gets added to your plate during the holidays, like the card, like the presents, like the hosting, or even going somewhere, right? Where are we going? A lot of times I know my husband's guilty of being like, oh, so where are we going? What are we doing?
Right.
It's on the family calendar, right? So there's I think a lot more gets added to our plate during the holidays. And yeah, having good communication with your partner, being able to say, here's the things that let's see what we need to do. And here's what, what are you going to do? What am I going to do, sort of thing. So you're not feeling overwhelmed by all of the tasks that have to happen during that already very busy season.
And what comes up a lot when I discuss this with my patients, whether it's the holiday stuff or just invisible labor in general, is this, well, he's like not going to do it. And so even if I put it on his plate, he's not going to do it.
Or he won't do it the right way.
Or he won't do it the right way.
That's different.
That is different. That's a different issue.
And I said, and that's kind of what we talk about. And I mean, this year I put something on my husband's plate and I said, hey, you're in charge of this. Like, this is you're in charge of this. And guess what? It did not get done.
Yep.
And I definitely felt the guilt of like from that person, because it's always something I did. And yet I was like, this was not my, and I just had to be sitting with that.
Yeah.
So you have to be, one, it might be that the thing does not get done, and you can decide then what to do with that. So don't assume it's not going to get done, because it might, and then they might, and that's different. But if it doesn't get done, then you have a different conversation, because then you have, I've given you this task and now you're not being a reliable partner. That's a different conversation that I don't think he'll do it. Or I should say she too. And then the other one is, they're not going to do it the same way I would. And I was like, well, then do you want help, or do you want it done exactly the way you would do it? If you actually want to be like doing this and having us help, and I shouldn't say help, it's just like a partner, then it's going to get done a little bit differently, but it's going to feel a lot better. But if it has to be exactly the way you want it, and the table needs to look exactly like this, and the present needs to be wrapped exactly like this, well, then you're right. You are going to do it all.
You better do it yourself.
Have you guys seen that? Have you seen that meme, or whatever? What are the graphic that's going around? That's like, I want my children to make good choices and be independent, but also the ornament does not go there. Like, and it's like, it's a woman taking it off the tree. I'm like, oh, I'm guilty.
Right? It reminds me of the phrase, done is better than perfect. Done is better than perfect. And it also makes me, that parallels a similar conversation I have to parents I work with who cannot let their kids experience natural consequences of not being organized or turning homework in on time or not studying. Oftentimes.
Or taking a jacket to school.
Or eating healthy choices.
And you have to drop the rope sometimes, is the metaphor I'll use. And they're like, well, if I don't make sure their homework's in their backpack, they might not turn their homework in. Right. So why don't natural consequences are the most impactful consequences. So why don't
better now than when they're in college?
100%. So it's the similar parallel where it's like, well, what if my husband doesn't do that? What if my kid's homework doesn't get turned in? Fill in the blank. Those are all natural consequences. Sometimes you need to let those things organically unfold and see what happens.
Right.
And there's a lot of value
to Wilhelmina's point, then it's a different conversation then.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. You're not talking about this hypothetically, I don't think you'll do it. You're talking about you're actually not doing it. And that's the different conversation.
Let your kid actually not have their homework turned in. Let them actually not study. Let them not bring a jacket. Let them forget to
don't constantly go online and check their grades and their homework and micromanage. Oh my gosh, you haven't turned in assignment B3. What's up with that?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Yes. And it's hard. And it's hard because you go from an incredible amount of oversight as a parent to slowly dialing it down, and to get from point A, where you're wiping your kid's butt, to point Z, which is them living fully independently out of your household, just being fully independent. There's a lot that needs to happen in between, but it's a dimmer. It's not an on and off switch. And you can't just all of a sudden, I have a lot of parents I work with who will go, my kid's 12. So now X, Y, and Z is going to start happening. Well,
all or nothing.
Wait a minute.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's
right.
Yeah. Let's adjust that. And that, I mean, for part of me, when I think of the holidays, it sort of relates to all of this is getting all the things done you need to get done, which for many people includes still having to work while your kids are home on break. So all of us are self-employed. And as we know, you get time off, but you're never really off, right? So, and I think...
But then you also get labeled as the flexible parent.
Oh, yes, because we have flexible schedules.
So flexible.
You're the flexible parent.
And once your kids...
It's so fun.
And once your kids reach school age, you typically don't have a daycare set up. You may or may not have a regular nanny. You probably have the usual babysitter list that you use, but they're off. If you think, even including the weekends, they're off for 2 full weeks, which, you know, ideally you can take some of that time off, maybe not all of it, but even if you're off, you're still having to respond to emails, do phone calls for most lines of work if you're working from home, depending on what you do for a living. And how much of that time do you dedicate? Do you get your kids spoken for? Do you have a babysitter, send them to camps, spend money on camps? I just signed my kids up for a day before Thanksgiving camp because we're hosting Thanksgiving. And so I'm like, having them out of the house from 9 to 3, they need to be out of the house because they're going to be off before that anyways, because they're off for that entire week. And so how do you...
entire week. When did this start? The entire week of Thanksgiving.
We get one day, Friday.
I know.
We would get half a day. We would have half a day of school on Wednesday, then Thursday off. And then I was like, what is this whole week? The first time it happened, I about shit my pants. I was like, I looked and I was like, wait,
it is a lot. It is a lot of time out. Now, as somebody who has worked in his schools previously and worked with classrooms of multiple children, half of me really appreciates that and understands how everybody needs this time off this time of year. But the parent in me is like, okay, what does my work schedule look like for that week? What am I going to do with my kids? My kids are 7 and 9. They are old enough to occupy themselves and young enough to not be left alone by themselves for hours at a time.
Right.
And obviously there's the sibling fighting every 3 to 5 minutes that occurs.
We want to limit their screen time,
we want to limit their screen time. And exactly. And so what do you do with them? And so I've often found myself circling back to COVID strategies, COVID times. And my kids were even littler then. They were 2 and 4 when COVID started, and our daycare came to an abrupt halt. So my husband and I both had to work from home with no childcare for several months straight. And looking back, I don't even have memories of it because I came, well, which is probably good and bad.
Blocked it out.
Trauma.
I know.
No idea what I did during that time.
We kicked off COVID within the first couple of weeks of my Tommy, my younger son, breaking his leg and having eye surgery. So we started off COVID with it was funny with a bang.
Yeah.
But I remember coming up with a daily visual schedule for the kids. So even when they couldn't read, I would draw pictures and print out, and I spent all this time on it. And I still do that, and will plan to do that this year, where we have a whiteboard in our kitchen, and I will say, here's the rough schedule for the day. And I usually cut it in half. And for the left side, this is roughly what the plan is. You're going to be going to this basketball thing, then you'll be home. Here are the times that Dad and I are absolutely not available. That will be when you're probably going to be on a screen. Here we have a babysitter lined up for 2 or 3 hours because those are meetings that we can't be interrupted. And then on the other side, I'll have the to-dos, like I need you to try to clean your room, brush your teeth, whatever. But then I also hand over the dry erase marker to them, and I'm like, okay, what else are you adding to this? And I let them add whatever, weirdo. And sometimes it's really cute, and sometimes it's laughable. Take me to Target and buy me whatever I want. I'm like,
Right.
I'd like to go to Dave and Buster's. No, we're not. No.
Yes. No.
Right.
But
that's what we did during the summer.
Yes.
Because during the summer is very similar with school age kiddos. There's some days you're going to have really good structured activities happening. And then some days where both parents are on a Zoom call for an hour, and that's going to be screen time. But having that visual schedule, I think, is a great idea, Terry, because it not only helps them, but it helps you to figure out the priorities as well as the sort of organization of the day.
One of the things that we had Ev do on days where like we, she's home and we're not, we have her come up with things that she wants to, like, we'll do. So she'll be like Barbies, drawing, and then she puts them in a little piece of paper and she puts them in like a little bag. And she then like goes in there and like surprises herself by like picking the activity. So she's coming up with the activities and then she's picking them out of she'll put in a bag or like a hat, whatever she decides that day. And she has really enjoyed that. And I think another important thing where like, obviously like it's important to have some structure for the day. It's also really important for them to be bored and figure it out. Right? Like there's times where, I have an only child, so she doesn't have a built-in playmate. And so there's plenty of times where I'm like, you're going to have to go and find something to do. Right. So, so like sometimes that's just part of it is, scheduling or knowing that you're going to have this downtime where they just need to figure it out. And that's okay. That's when they use their imagination. And that's when they're creative. That's when, like Everly will come up with some of the coolest things. She's like, Mom, look at this thing I made, and in those moments. So while it's very important, I think, to have like she needs to have her 15 minutes where she's reading a day and all these things, I think it's also equally important to give them time to just be bored and figure it out on their own. Like, absolutely figure it out. Like, I think we all did.
I think that is such a critical point. To the point where my kids have different personalities, but my older son could play by himself, entertain himself now. I mean, he's 9.5, draw, make comics, build Legos, whatever. He could do it for hours by himself.
So could Maddie.
Yeah. And his younger brother, my younger son, is used to just having this playmate 2 years older than him. And he's got probably 30 minutes of independent play in him, give or take. And that's because
some of that's developmentally, right? Like age, like, right.
So it's developmentally appropriate, but he's very quick to go, where's Danny? What's he doing? What's going on over here? Oh, can we, I'm about done being by myself now because I've never been by myself.
And those are the poke the bear moments. So I will say a caveat. I love the idea of being bored and being creative. As parents that have multiple kids, you do have to strategically decide when that's going to be, so that they can be doing those things and you can have an ear and you're not focused in on like a Zoom call or something like that, just in case they choose something that's not super my kids, we did a be bored and be creative not too long ago. And they love creating little miniature golf, like putt courses in the basement. But I could tell there was a lot of noise. They were moving my free weights. To like putt under them. Great idea. But like they can't do some of the heavier weights. I was like, oh, okay, let me help you with this before I go and do the thing that I was about to do. Anyway, but no, I love that idea of having the time for them to be bored, and that's okay. Bored is not a bad word.
Yeah.
No.
Somehow we've made it in, or I should say kids have made it into a bad word. It's not. It's a good thing.
My go-to.
I think parents. I was just going to say, I think parents don't let it play out. So they think, my kid just can't do that. And I'm like, okay, maybe they have trouble in the first 5 minutes, maybe even the first 10 minutes. But then all of a sudden you hear silence and I go and I open Griffin's door and he's building some sort of Lego thing. And yet, sometimes those first little bit, it's a little rough, it's a little clunky, but if you practice it, if you do it regularly, they'll get used to that.
That's true.
I mean, when Griffin was younger, we would have quiet time when he dropped his nap, and it would be just him in his room playing, and he got used to it. So it's sort of practicing it. It's kind of knowing it's going to be a little clunky at first, but if you let it play out, it's almost always going to be okay. But if you don't ever practice it and you don't let it play out, then you're going to think my kid can't do it.
Something I would add to that, and that is so true, is that you need to be patient and let that play out. Is if your kid comes to you complaining, I'm bored, one of my favorite phrases to reply to them is, "Good thing you're really creative. I can't wait to see what you come up with."
Yeah.
To the
You
point,
can figure this out.
to the point where now when my kids, they know what's going to come out of my mouth. So towards me, and they're just like, "Forget it. I know what she's going to say." Like, it's not even worth complaining.
See, they learn. Learning.
Exactly.
I think another thing that this is kind of changing of topics, but I know this is something that I have talked about with friends and family, and some of my other patients have brought it up just in this last week, is a little bit of the concern about the Thanksgiving table and conversations that maybe are different, political views that are different, because right now, of course, in our country, it seems very like, it's not just sort of like, oh, we just have different opinions. It feels very divisive. So sometimes people can have family members where you don't agree on things, and that can get very heated, and that can get very volatile very quickly. And so we have talked a lot about setting boundaries with conversations, setting boundaries around the table, and kind of saying like, hey, we're not going to talk politics, or we're not going to talk about this, and that's okay to do. That's okay to do, to set some boundaries. The other thing is, go in with expectations that are realistic. If your family member is always doing this thing that pushes your buttons, guess what they're going to do it this year too? And I'd like to think you go in, this is the year that it's going to be magical. Everyone's going to get along, but the in-laws aren't going to, no, it's going to be most likely like every other one. So keep every other one. So keep your
predictable.
So keep your expectations in check and really think, okay, how can I be okay with how this is going to play out? Because I kind of know how it's going to play out. So maybe I'm not going to get mad when the same thing happens again. Maybe I'm not going to get hurt by the comments. Maybe I'm just going to know. And I can set some boundaries around what I know is going to happen and set it up beforehand. And another thing is, careful with the drinking, because it's really hard to do that when you're chugging the wine all day. Believe me, I mean, we all okay, the Macy's parade is done, let's crack that bottle open. I get it. And yet by the time you sit down for dinner, your boundaries and all of the zen you've done, it's gone. And then you're left with a volatile table. So
I also think it's important that, if you are in these situations and with your family, and it is incredibly challenging, and year after year, it's the same thing, it's okay to set up the boundary and say, I'm not doing this. Right. And that's hard. That's really hard, right? To say like, I'm not doing this, not because, we talked earlier about having to be in 5 different places at the same time, but just deciding that you're not going to be part of something that isn't, good for you kind of emotionally. And that is, I think, the toughest. Like it's easy to tell someone like, oh, sorry, we can't make this year because we got to whatever. But it's a very different situation when you're saying to yourself, like this situation is too toxic for me to be in, and I need to set my boundary, and I need to say I'm not going to be part of this because this isn't good for me mentally, right? So I think you can do both. I think that you can go in and set up the expectations and just know like, Uncle Frank's gonna, start that conversation, and I'm just gonna tell my, my answer is gonna be, I'm not talking politics today, and I'm gonna walk away, right? Or you can say, there's nothing in this situation that I want to be a part of, right? Like, and so I'm just gonna remove myself from the situation.
Yes.
So, and start something different.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard because again, you have to have the difficult conversation. Potentially, they maybe won't receive it well, but you have to, if it's important to you and it's important to not get wrapped up into it, then you've kind of have to be okay with having the difficult conversation or pulling yourself out of the situation.
Yeah. And thinking of like the stressors, like another one that I thought of is, dealing with like loss of family during the holidays. And I mean, you all know, but I haven't mentioned this on the podcast, but my stepmom passed away. She was diagnosed with a glioblastoma, which is an aggressive brain tumor. And this is our second holiday season without her. And Christmas was her favorite. I already told everyone, I was like, I'm not going to make it through this without crying. But that's like, you know, the holidays are a really tough time, I think, for some people, and we may not even know it. We don't know like what their background story is. And sometimes it's from like a loss of a family member, and other things too. Like the holidays can just be really stressful, or, you know, some people don't have family, right, to be with. And so I know for me, like, you know, Christmas in particular, like I can think of our last Christmas with her, not even realizing it was going to be our last Christmas. Right. And it's just a hard time of year, you know, for all of us. Right. And I imagine that it'll get easier, but I don't know. But it's like, you're fine. And then all of a sudden, you know, you think of something like that, you know, like I said, for my stepmom, Christmas was like really important and she loved it. And even if that's not the case, like that, you know, someone that you've lost in your family, that wasn't their specific like holiday that they really loved, but just that like getting together with family and friends, that like concept of that, and then that person not being there, like that can be another tough one to kind of navigate. And before losing my stepmom, I have, you know, friends and other family members who have lost a parent. And it's one of those situations where, you know, anytime something bad happens, you say, I'm so sorry, I can't imagine. And the reality is, you cannot imagine how hard it is to lose a parent until it happens. Like, you literally cannot like imagine it. And it can be lost not just of a parent, but you know, a child, you know, somebody else in your, like a close friend. So I think the holidays can be really hard for people to, you know, who are navigating like loss. And that's something that's so important for us to like, you know, remember. I try, as I've gotten older, I've gotten better about like, you know, we say give people grace, like, cause you never know what's going on, but like, it's so true. Yeah. Like, you know, my initial inclination when somebody like, you know, cuts me off, whatever, is to be like, you know, like mother trucker. And then I will catch myself and be like, hey, you know what? Maybe that person just lost their job. Maybe that person's just having a shit ass day, right? Maybe that person just lost a family member, a loved one. So I really do try in those moments to like, even if my initial reaction is like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that person did that. Is to kind of be like, okay, you know, I don't know what's going on in that person's life. And so I think that's like a good kind of perspective to have, you know, especially during the holidays.
I think that's good in general at the holidays.
It is,
I mean,
absolutely.
to go back to Wilhelmina's conversation, which is not nearly as challenging as the loss of a loved one, but different political views, like you just don't know what people are going through and where they're coming from. And so coming from a place of empathy is always I think always a really good way to approach the holiday season in general. I think it's a really good, but especially if you know somebody has lost somebody close to them and you don't know how it's impacting them. Just be empathetic.
And always offering the most generous interpretation, right? Like Dr. Beck.
Yes, it goes a long way.
Right. Yes. Always erring on the most generous interpretation of someone's behavior and where they're coming from.
When somebody cuts me off in traffic, I always say that it's a woman whose her water broke and she's on her way to the hospital. Right? That's a super generous interpretation. And I am immediately like, go on, lady.
That's a good example. Yes.
Right.
Well, and I think this is really just a good time to really be aware of the things that you are thankful and grateful for, and not in like a Mary Poppins way, but just in a hold those loved ones close, because you don't know what's going to happen. And, you know, you can be annoyed by family members, but then also think, oh, but if they weren't here, you know, sometimes that's so. Really reminding yourself that this is stressful. This is hard. I mean, it is. The holidays are hard. That is true. But think about some of the really wonderful things and the joy and the gratitude that you can be with your family. You can be enjoying friends, enjoying good food, all the things that have brought you here for this time of year. So I think it is a good time to, you know, honor that and remind yourself of that, so you can be present and then not regret like, oh, I was just so busy. I didn't even.
Yeah. And thinking about like, you know, and when there's family, like kind of, you know, stressful dynamics. And I think one of the things to say to yourself is like, is this really a big deal? Are the other things worth, you know, me just saying like, I don't really care what Uncle Frank says. I'm just going to move on. Right. Like, I'm just not going to give that. I'm just not going to give that my attention, energy.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, I'm just going to let that go because, all the other 49 people here bring me joy. And it's such a great time to be with my family.
Yeah.
And you're right. You truly don't know. My stepmom was only 54 when she passed away. If you had told me that was going to be the last time that I had Christmas with her, I would have been like, you're out of your mind. Right. And so you don't know. And so, so I think if you can, find that kind of good space and say, put that aside. That's not a big deal. If it really isn't like a big deal to do that, especially again, this is a lot of things we're talking about today can be implemented at any point in your life, but particularly during the holidays when you
heightened.
Heightened because there are more kind of opportunities to be with family and friends. That's like the expectation, right? That there's these situations are going to, be more available during that time of year. So absolutely. Any other thoughts on stressors during the holidays in general?
I think that's a great place to leave it.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for joining our discussion today on managing stressors during the holiday season. This episode will actually be our last one for this season, but no worries. We will be back the first week in January with a whole new season. Please be sure to email us at theshrinkdown.podcast@gmail.com with suggestions for topics you would like us to discuss. Like I mentioned, this topic from today was actually one that somebody emailed us about. So please do email us if you have some ideas. We will also be posting a quick survey on Instagram, just asking kind of about things that you might want us to talk about and just get a sense of what people are enjoying as far as the podcast topics. If you're not following us already, please do. Our handle is @theshrinkdown.